ABC about it, then a lot of people the next Monday morning are going to buy it even at $500, hoping that by the end of that week it'll be $1,200, which it often was. That's what this kind of a bubble, that's what it means. That's all the bubble means. That it's a self-reinforcing hysteria. Okay? But at some point, some company official gets up and says, we're a little nervous, our shares are selling for $450 a share, and, if we sold the company and just cashed out, everybody would get 82 cents. So you've invested in something whose underlying worth is 82 cents, and you paid $450, and there were suddenly, and by the way, and I mean suddenly, because no one knows exactly what does it. If you think, well, somebody announced, no, often people announce a disaster, but if the euphoria is strong enough, the disaster comes and goes and nobody cares. But something happens. It's a very mysterious thing. It's fascinated economists, because it's so hard to figure out when. Because it turns out economics will never answer that question. It has to do with politics and culture and music and family life and television programs and everything that shapes a population, so that suddenly something that was only going to go up and up and up suddenly is scaring people. Now, if you've spent $500 for a share gambling that it would go to 12, because in the previous 3 weeks it went from 50 to 500, you are then acutely aware of what goes up, could go down. And if you believe, if something breaks the euphoria that it might go down, then you've got to be the first one to sell, because it's going to go down as fast as it went up. And you're stuck having spent $500 on something that could end up being 82 cents. Right? A year ago, I don't know the exact numbers, but a year ago, Citibank shares were, $40 a share? And today they're 2 or 1, whatever it is now. Went up a little bit, I'm sure, today, but basically nothing. So Citibank was one of the most secure investments in the world. So people who didn't get out had something worth $40 6 months ago, and that's worth $2 now. If your pension fund had a lot of shares of Citibank, which lots and lots and lots of pension funds in America did, how are you going to pay people their pension? You haven't got the money, and there's no way to get it. Okay, so the stock market exploded. In March of 2000, it tanked. We had a real basic crash of the stock market. And it terrified everybody. It was the first break. The first break in this story. And it showed up in the stock market, which is a financial industry place. That's where pieces of paper that the finance industry produces are bought and sold. That's what a stock is. Please notice, in the first year of this decade, we had a crash. And in the last year of this decade, we are in the middle of a crash. We've had 10 years of a very rocky... This thing broke. It didn't break last year. It broke 10 years ago, 9 years ago. This time, 9 years ago, March 2000, this... And as I told you, never recovered, basically. The stock market never really, the NASDAQ never came even close to that 5,000 index level that it had back then. Well, what happened, and this is important to get to the crisis now. Good. What happened is the leadership of the United States at that time, the new President George Bush, right, in 2000, he just gets... When did he get elected? November of 2000, so he took office in January. So this crash happens actually before he wins the election. What?
It was under Clinton.
So this happens under Clinton, but the new president is on his way in, and the new president takes office in 2001, and he's faced with a real oof, a little bit the way Obama is faced with this woof, the same situation. So what in the world are they going to do? They're terrified. And the big fear is that the collapse of the stock market and the collapse of the financial industry around the stock market is going to lead to a general economic downturn, recession, depression, collapse. Terrified that that's going to happen. And because we've had this sort of 20-year boom, 80s and 90s, And now it's supposed to never stop. Now it has stopped big time. And a great fear that what happened in 1929 when the stock market collapsed and then we had 10 years of depression, that fear, even if you didn't live through it, if you've ever studied it, it's got to be in your head somewhere, and it certainly was in the heads of the people that Bush gathered around him. So the person they turned to was the head of the Federal Reserve, who's our central banker, our leading banker in America, Alan Greenspan. And he, together with the, I don't mean to put it all on him, but he's the sort of the figurehead of it all. He decided that the way to deal with this problem, to prevent the collapse of the stock market from freaking everybody out, all the people who now had no wealth. Remember, try to understand, if you're owning shares and they're going up and up and up, you're feeling wonderful. You're getting a monthly statement from your broker, and each monthly thing, if you ever look at a monthly brokerage statement, it has the value of your holdings at the end of last month as compared to the end of this month, right? And so you can see which one is bigger. It lets you know I'm doing well. So month after month, year after year, it goes up and up and up. If you're lucky enough to have any shares, mutual funds or anything else. And then suddenly, you adjust kind of over those 20 years. I have some money. I can do things. I can go to Europe on a vacation. I can buy a fancy car. I can move to a nicer home. I can do these things because it's kind of mystical and magical. You have no idea what this is about. Particularly if you have a mutual fund, you often have no idea what they're actually invested in unless you read those incomprehensible booklets they send you, which no one did. So it's just all manna from heaven. It's a mystical, lovely blessing, and if you're a religious person, you literally see it that way. And then, of course, the devil takes over, and the blessing turns into a curse, and it's a disaster. And now you don't know what to do. And the fear is, a very old economics idea, the fear is that when wealth goes up, you feel easy about spending money. You don't mind spending your income because, in a sense, your rainy day fund, your wealth, is going up. So you can relax about it. But when your wealth is going down, same logic, you've got to cut back expenditures because what you had to fall back on isn't there for you anymore. So you better, hold back. Don't spend so much. Put a little aside to compensate for the falling value of what you had. So people, that was the great fear then. That is the great fear now, and that has been happening. Yeah.
What is it called again? Something thrift, that term?
The paradox of thrift. I'll come to that in a minute. It's a little different. This first idea, though, is really simple. It's the person who first formulated it in economics. You'll see his name. At least he gets the credit. He wasn't the first one. A British economist named Pigou, contemporary of Keynes in England. It was called the wealth effect. Basically, the idea is when your wealth is rising, you're into spending. And when your wealth is falling, you cut back on your spending. The ups and downs of your wealth have an effect on your spending habits out of your income. So the great fear that in 2000 was what might happen is what has been happening over the last 7-8 months in the United States. A drastic cutback as people's wealth goes down. In the United States, it has been the wealth of the stock market going down and the wealth of housing stock going down as prices of homes come down. So, most Americans have no stocks. The only wealth that most Americans have is their home. So if you drop the value of homes, you're dropping the value of the most important wealth that most Americans have. If at the same time housing prices tank, which they are, and stock market prices tank, which they did, you got a real 1-2 punch there. Wealth is evaporating. By the way, for those of you not aware, trillions have vanished. Not billions, trillions. I don't know exactly how many, but several trillions of dollars worth of wealth that Americans thought they had, they don't have now. So that it's not there for their retirement, it's not there for a special event, it's not there for the education of their kids, it's just not there. And many Americans have not yet begun to deal with it. The number of people I encounter who no longer look at their monthly statement. The 401k comes, the stockbroker thing comes, and they leave it right in the envelope, into the circular file, burn it in the fireplace, whatever they do, because they They saw it a few times. That is so frightening. So they live in a kind of self-imposed ignorance. Even though the documents keep coming, they don't know like this. So the great fear in 2000 was that this would happen. And here's how it was dealt with. Alan Greenspan decided we can prevent it if we suddenly make an immense amount of money available to everybody. We say to everybody, look, sure, your wealth just got murdered in the stock market, but we're going to let you borrow money at silly rates of interest. You've never seen them before in your life. We're going to give you long-term loans at 2, 3, 4%. They had been 7, 8, and 9% or more. And we're going to drop in, and he did. Starting around 2001, 2002, over a period of about 15, 16 months, they had, I think, 10 or 11 cuts in the interest rate. We've never, before in American history, we've never had that many cuts in that short an amount of time. This was panic. Flood the economy with money. Just print it and get it out there, lend it to everybody, and make the interest rate so low that everybody in their mind who's ever fantasized about having something that they couldn't afford and would have to borrow for would now do it to take advantage of these unbelievable, historically unprecedented low interest rates. That's what he did. And, again, this complicated thing. Did it work? Yes. Did it fail? Yes. Now let's explain. How did it work? Here's what happened. And I don't even think they knew that this was going to happen. They later, some of them said they did. I don't believe it. What happened was they were right that people would borrow. What they didn't know was what they would borrow for. They could have guessed, but they actually didn't know. Here's what happened. The lowered interest rates did not stimulate business to borrow all that much for business expansion, for all the reasons we've already seen. That didn't work. That was not where it succeeded. Where it succeeded was in the housing market and in real estate. The money became so cheap that everybody who had ever thought about it borrowed money to buy a house